Candidates for San Diego's congressional districts are campaigning furiously ahead of the March primary. We look at who's running, who's making waves, and at the issues in 3 contested races. I'm Mark Sauer, and the KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Mark Sauer, and joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today, KPBS reporter Priya Sridhar, Michael Smolens, columnist with the San Diego Union Tribune, KPBS investigative reporter Amitha Sharma, and reporter Matt Hoffman of KPBS News. Well, it took a scandal playing out over years, resulting in felony charges, a plea deal, and resignation. But for the first time in 40 years, someone not named Hunter will be representing San Diego's 50th Congressional District. It's a wide-open race and a rare district in California, one that heavily favors Republicans. And Priya, start with who's running, some familiar names here.
That's right. We have State Senator Brian Jones, who represents much of the 50th District already. He lives in the 50th District, along with Amar Campanajjar, who many people might be familiar with him. He ran against Duncan Hunter back in 2018. He's a former Obama administration official. He's running on the Democratic side.
Lone Democrat.
That's right. We have Darrell Issa, who is a 9-term congressman in the 49th District. He's obviously a well-known California businessman. A lot of people might be familiar with his name as well. And then we also have radio host and former San Diego City Councilman Carl DeMaio. And what's interesting right now is that Governor Gavin Newsom actually decided not to hold a special election, so there'll be no representation in the 50th District for the next year. So a lot of the voters up there who I've gotten a chance to speak to are just waiting for this primary to happen because they want someone else to get into that seat in January of 2021.
And of course, Hunter couldn't vote for the longest time anyway, so they really haven't had a representative for a long time.
Yeah.
And briefly remind us of the boundaries there. It's mostly East County, right?
Yeah, so it's a lot of San Diego County. It includes a lot of the suburban and outlying areas like San Marcos, Fallbrook, Alpine, Ramona, Escondido, Santee, Lakeside, and El Cajon. And it also goes up to some of the areas in Imperial County as well.
All right, now, as you noted, Campanajjar came with just a few points of defeating an entrenched incumbent. Of course, he had an opponent under indictment that might be a bit of an advantage there. How's he positioning himself as a Democrat out there this time? That's
right. He lost by fewer than 9,000 votes last time, which, as you mentioned, is the closest that anyone has ever come to potentially defeating Duncan Hunter. And he, says very openly that he's been campaigning for the seat for 3 years. So he's hoping that a lot of the familiarity that he was able to build in the last election, that the voters there will remember him. Obviously, he's a Democrat. This is a hugely red district, one of the most reliably red districts in California, but he also has campaigned as a little bit of a moderate moderate Democrat. He always talks about how he owns guns, his position on border and immigration issues. He wants immigration reform, but he also wants a strong border. So it's kind of interesting to see how he's appealed to some of the voters up there. Obviously, there's a lot of changing demographics in the 50th. There is a big immigrant and refugee population, so I think he's also trying to court that vote as well.
And he doesn't like the Green New Deal, we should point out, too.
Right, which is very interesting from a Democrat.
And Michael, your column today notes that Campanajjar is kind of hedging on whether he even would have voted to impeach Donald Trump, which is, what nearly all Democrats in Congress obviously voted to do. Is this a winning formula in this district to go kind of Republican-like?
Well, certainly you could drop the term kinda. He is hedging. He's just not saying how he would vote, and it won't get into the details. It's a long, explanation he has why. Is it a winning combination? It's going to be tough. It's still a very Republican district. I think his best hope was for Duncan Hunter to stay in the race and win, but the competition he would face of either of those 3 prominent Republicans will be very difficult. Can he do it? Anything can happen. But as we were just talking, that he is really playing up his East County roots, his roots in the district. He does live in the district, and we know that a couple of the prominent ones, Darrell Issa and Carl DeMaio, do not live in the district, which isn't a requirement to run for Congress.
Which surprises a lot of people, right?
But does it bother constituents?
To varying degrees, we have this long debate. Is it something we more care about than the constituents? In the East County, there's a certain parochial pride there, and I think it resonates a little bit more there. But you go back and forth. Darrell Issa, in a previous incarnation of the district he represented, actually represented about a third, or give or take, of the 50th district. So, there's all that.
Familiar with him there. Yeah.
But not only is he playing up his East County roots, but also his sort of East County sensibilities. And the difficult question for him on impeachment is one of those, because he knows, this is a district that supported Donald Trump by 15 points over Hillary Clinton. The question is, does that sort of waffling lose him any kind of traction, not only potentially with some Republicans who might say, you got to take a stand on important issues, right. But the progressive Democrats are a little concerned about that, but
right.
He's the one they're going to vote for.
All right, well, let's turn to you mentioned Republicans, a nice segue. Let's talk about Brian Jones, and we'll get into the other two maybe more familiar names.
Yeah, so Brian Jones, I would say out of the three, is kind of the one who isn't as interested in the mudslinging that we're seeing going on between DeMaio and Darrell Issa. He really wants to try to campaign on, the fact that he is now working as a state senator in Sacramento. He believes that he's been able to reach across the aisle, and obviously a super Democratic state, and, get stuff done. But he's also a pastor, so he likes to talk about the Bible. He likes to talk about the fact that he lives in the 50th district. He also loves guns, so he's really trying to appeal to a lot of those just cultural things that I guess you would think of when you think of the 50th district.
And then, Michael, let's get into this whole kind of battle between the other two Republicans out there, Issa and DeMaio. Each one comes into this with some baggage.
Well, they've been around for a long time, and I guess that comes with the territory.
Natural baggage. Yeah.
Issa had, when he was a young man, some run-ins with the law. Never spent, prison time or anything like that. That was a long time ago. I think the biggest political liability is, he represented a different district. He decided not to run in that district because he likely was going to lose. He was sort of on the run by the Democrats and the Big Blue Wave last go around.
Weekly protests.
So weekly protests outside his office. So he, he's running in this district. Another thing that we'll see, it hasn't really come up, but he didn't support the big tax cut because he thought that it would hurt homeowners in his district because of the cost of the valuation of their houses. Very anti-tax district, and Carl DeMaio, who is a taxpayer advocate. I think that's even on his ballot.
Lost on the gas tax.
Yeah. Still, but that's his push. DeMaio, he's well known. He's his radio talk show is syndicated, or it was syndicated. He's not doing it right now. He was a very prominent member of the city council, but he hasn't won a lot. He won that city council seat, but he ran for mayor. He didn't win. He ran for Congress. He was thinking about running for mayor again. The Republicans said, no, we want Kevin Faulconer. The question is, if he doesn't make it this time, is he going to continue to find a seat? He ran against Scott Peters in the 52nd district, which we'll talk about, which is a much more moderate, Democratic-leaning seat. And his message was very different than it is in the conservative 50th. So that's going to come into play.
And Priya, this got nasty pretty fast, this battle between DeMaio and Darrell Issa.
Yeah, I mean, we're already seeing ads that Darrell Issa put out recently that had headlines from the Los Angeles Blade and The Hill that referenced Carl DeMaio being gay.
Of course, he's long been an openly gay politician.
Right, and so there were actually reporters who found Darrell Issa and confronted him about that and asked him, why he chose to use those headlines in his campaign ad. And he, very strategically said you should call up those news organizations and ask them why they chose to use those words in the headlines. But so you're seeing a lot of back and forth, which constituents in the 50th district are very used to. They saw a lot of those attack ads in the last election between Duncan Hunter and Amar Campanishar. And according to the latest polls, the UT 10 News poll that came out just a few weeks ago, Carl DeMaio and Darrell Issa are neck and neck with 20% and 21% of the voters supporting them in that district. So it really seems like they are the two front runners on the Republican side. So I really don't think those attack ads are going to go away anytime soon.
So quickly explain the top two vote getters, no matter what party.
Exactly. Go to November. Most primaries still act like a partisan primary. Campanishar should get into November, given
he's in the high 20s in that poll now, right?
He does have, there's at least one Democratic opponent, a woman named Marissa Calderon, who's an executive director of this nationwide real estate association. She hasn't polled very highly. Will that make a difference? Most people don't seem to think so, but you never know. But he should be in there. So the real primary is among the Republicans.
And Michael, when we talk about ISA, I mean, he was handpicked by President Trump to lead a federal agency. Obviously, that confirmation didn't go through. If it did, does he ever enter this race for Congress here?
Probably not. I think that he wanted that, and actually he sort of delayed his entry into the race. He was open about considering it to make sure that, okay, the nail was in the coffin, that the Democrats in the Senate were going to block his confirmation regardless. So then he headed in this direction. So there is that sort of question, I guess, how much does he really want it? We know Carl DeMaio really wants it. I mean, he runs for a lot of things, and he runs full bore.
Well, it's going to be fascinating to see what happens, especially on the Republican side. Excuse me, we're going to move on now to the 52nd Congressional District, where incumbent Scott Peters is facing a challenge from both left and right. And so, Amitha, the Democrat Peters had some tough races early in his congressional career, but not lately, right?
Not lately. So the 52nd Congressional District used to be a very tough district, a very red district. It was considered a battleground district. And Scott Peters wrestled away the district back in 2012 from former Republican Brian Bilbray. And then he fended off a challenge from former San Diego councilman Carl DeMaio in a squeaker of a race, just like 2012 was. But things started to change in 2016 when Peters beat Republican businesswoman by a wide margin. And then he did it again in 2018. So this district used to be safely Republican.
And tell us again where it is.
It was a red district.
It's up north.
So the 52nd Congressional District spans most of coastal San Diego County, La Jolla, Mission Beach, downtown San Diego. It goes into Miramar and Poway. Not Miramar, Mira Mesa, and Poway. But so anyway, it used to be a safely Republican district. It started to turn purple a few years ago, and now Democrats hold around a 35,000 voter advantage over Republicans.
So still with an incumbent there, it's fairly safe now. The whole thing has changed, as you said. Now Scott Peters spent 8 years on the San Diego Council. 4 terms in this district. He's an environment lawyer, but he's getting a challenge from a Democrat. Tell us who she is and why she's taking on Peters.
So it's Nancy Cassidy. She sits on the California Food and Agricultural Board. She basically comes from the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. And she says she got into this race because Peters does not support the new Green Deal. The Green New Deal? The new Green Deal.
New Deal, yeah.
The new Green Deal.
New Green Deal.
And, she says, look, we are in a huge climate emergency, and that emergency mandates that our congressmen, like Scott Peters, Democratic congresspeople, congressional representatives, support the new Green Deal. Now, Scott Peters says, look, I'm all for getting the United States off of fossil fuels, but I don't like the fact that this deal was created in somewhat of an echo chamber. It doesn't do much to reach across the aisle to build Republican consensus. And I think it should be said that Peters ended up endorsing former New York Mayor Mike Bloomberg for president this week, and now he is the national chair of Bloomberg's Climate, Energy, and Environmental Council. So that buffets some criticism on the left of his environmental credentials. And as you said, he's a former environmental lawyer.
And Michael Cassidy's run before and lost to Republicans. She have any shot against her fellow Democrats this time?
Everybody has a shot. Lightning can strike. I always preface that, but probably not. I mean, Scott Peters is involved with the presidential campaign. He's also one of the regional chairs of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, which is, sort of the campaign committee for the entire Democratic race in the coming year. He's the head of the regional outlook. So obviously, if he gets into trouble, he'll retrench, but he's looking at other things. He's pretty safe. Nancy Cassidy's pretty much a one-issue candidate, and as Amitha was talking about, Scott Peters is not a climate, change denier. I mean, he has bipartisan climate-related legislation that's moved ahead and things like that. But understandably, people that support the Green New Deal are very adamant and have protested outside his office, other Democratic offices. So they're targeting Democrats. Is she strong enough to do that? Might he lose some votes? Probably, but not enough not to get to November, and she probably won't beat the Republican.
Well, that neatly brings up the Republican in this race here. Tell us about Jim DeBello, right?
Well, he's born and bred in this region. I think he's from Grossmont originally. He got his undergrad and an MBA from Harvard. He holds 5 patents. He's a tech executive. He's been involved in helping the county develop its food insecurity policy. And he's a Republican.
And he's skeptical about man-made climate change, even for a guy with a tech
It's a little
background.
bit more complicated than that. He says he's not altogether sold that climate change is caused by humans, but at the same time, he calls climate change our greatest challenge, our greatest environmental challenge. And he also says that he's in favor of getting the United States off of fossil fuels.
Is he embracing the Green New Deal then?
I don't believe he is.
That's probably not in the cards. Well, it is odd in California at this point to see someone who really is running with any kind of skepticism in the midst of the climate crisis, as you pointed out.
It is, and I think he's hedging just because of those different positions he's taken on the environment. He's hedging a little bit in this district.
It makes it easy to attack.
Yeah.
You know, as Amitha said, that it's more nuanced. He believes climate change is happening. It's a big challenge, but there's enough there to raise questions about him. In that district, coastal districts, people, well, everywhere, but particularly in a district like that, people are very sensitive, I think, to climate change, sea level rise. So if there's a way to go after him, if there's a need to go after him, you can imagine that probably would be it.
Any polling so far in this particular district?
No, because I don't think that, it's still...
Yeah, certainly
It would be a
Peters
shock
will
if
lose.
Scott
Yeah.
Peters would lose, yeah.
Didn't get through comfortably. All right, we're going to turn now to the 53rd Congressional District, where you can't tell the players without a scorecard. Way too many candidates at this point, 15 to comb through in the time we have. So we're going to have to just focus on those who appear viable here, which is always a touchy thing. But this seat opened up when 20-year congressional veteran Susan Davis announced her retirement, Matt, and tell us where the 53rd is and how the voter registration stacks up there.
Right, so the 53rd actually covers a really large portion of San Diego. I mean, we have the city of San Diego, Hillcrest, Old Town, you have La Mesa, you have parts of El Cajon, then you go down south, you have parts of Chula Vista. So it really encompasses a large part of San Diego County, and lots of different voters fall into that. Registration, it's a 2-to-1 margin. It's a very, very heavily Democratic district, about 180,000 registered Democrats to 90,000 registered Republicans, about 14,000 independents. I talked to a political science professor who says this is an extremely safe seat for Democrats. I mean, regardless, even if a Republican were to make it out of the primary, it's almost guaranteed that a Democrat's going to win this seat.
All right, so let's talk about the so-called acknowledged frontrunners at this point.
Well,
just got a handful out of all that.
A handful, yeah.
Group.
I mean, I think 20 or more than 24 ended up throwing their hat or saying that they were going to run
Initially,
for this.
yeah.
15 ended up on the ballot. One of those has dropped out, so we have 14 candidates that will be appearing on the ballot. When we talk about some of the top candidates, we could look at fundraising. Now, our latest reports are from the end of September. There's a fundraising deadline coming up. We know that Sarah Jacobs is the top fundraiser getter right now in terms of $300,000. Georgette Gomez, current San Diego City Council president, $200,000. And then U.S. Marine Corps veteran Janessa Goldbeck, around $100,000. From the Republican side, there are 3 Republicans that are running in this race. Famila Ramos, she ran for a school board seat in Chula Vista, lost, but she got about 30,000 votes, so she thinks that she's got some name recognition there. She's actually filed her latest campaign filings, and she's raised a little over $40,000, the most out of any Republicans, but obviously far less than the Democrats have raised.
All right, start with Georgette Gomez. She wants to springboard from San Diego City Council president to Congress.
Right.
Why? What's her platform?
Yeah, she's been in San Diego City Council for, this will end up being 4 years. She's decided not to run again, so she's all in here with the 53rd. She's running on a lot of different issues. I mean, she thinks that she brings experience from doing some activism in that district, the Barrio Logan area. She's campaigning on a lot of things: housing affordability, bringing more federal dollars to San Diego. She says they don't get enough. Access to education, job safety, climate. She really wants to bring federal dollars to help cities as they build out these climate action plans to make sure that they're actually enforcing these climate action plans. And she's also a big transit advocate. Obviously, we're trying to build a Grand Central Station here in San Diego, and she says that there's just not enough local dollars there. We're going to need federal dollars, and her plan is to help bring those.
All right, a well-known name is Sarah Jacobs. Tell us about her. She's upfront about being well-funded thanks to her family. I should note the Jacobs family are longtime contributors to KPBS.
Right, yeah, obviously her granddaughter, the co-founder of Qualcomm. So,
right.
Yeah, they have quite a bit of money. But she, obviously, she worked in Obama's State Department, was part of the Hillary Clinton campaign. So she's got some experience. She's running on a number of different things. Climate change, she says she hears a lot of people talking to her about climate change, young people. Gun violence, people are scared to go to school. She wants to change that. But then we see some of the same things in terms of, housing affordability. Due to her time in the State Department, she really wants to go and help with foreign policy, get us out of these endless wars she talks about. And the other thing she's campaigning heavily on, she's been a childhood poverty advocate, ending childhood poverty, but talking about childcare, she says people are spending way too much money on childcare, especially in San Diego, 30 to 40% of their income. She wants to make a mandate that no person pays more than 10% of their income on childcare.
All right, and a woman who's drawn favorable comments at candidate forums and kind of just come out of nowhere, really, right, is Janessa Goldbeck. What's her background?
Well, we know where she came out of. She came out of the Marine Corps last August. Yeah, she's running a campaign that's centered around a number of different things. I mean, we talk about housing affordability. She's really hitting hard on the climate crisis. She says it's the biggest threat to our democracy is climate change, which is kind of interesting. But her mother has some...
Is she running that from a defense standpoint here? Because the Pentagon has talked a lot about global conflict based on climate change.
She is. I mean, she knows from her experience in the Marine Corps. But also she's running on things like prescription drugs. Prescription drugs are too expensive. Also, long-term health care. Her mom is in an assisted living facility, and she says those costs, I mean, I know too, they're astronomically through the roof, and we need to lower those. She also believes that too many votes in Congress are bought off by big donors, and she doesn't want to ever be bought off by any big donors.
Okay, Michael, what kind of, on the Democratic side here in this race, we're not surprised to see any of these candidates talking about the issues that we've covered here.
No, it's a very Democratic district, and they're all kind of on the same page. There's some nuances. Some support Medicare for all, some others don't, but want to improve Obamacare and head in that direction. I think the same with the Green New Deal, but I think most of them are on board with that. When this first started, it really seemed like a two-person race, Gomez and Sarah Jacobs.
Who we should know had run before in the 49th. Right. I'm trying to keep
well, and there was talk that when Scott Peters in the 52nd was all but certain, it seemed, to run for mayor, that she was going to run there. So there's a little bit of a district shopping rap against her in that regard. Gomez doesn't live in the district, but she has been of that area for some time, and she's of the the grassroots, the real the progressive of San Diego progressives. I believe she got the Democratic Party endorsement,
which comes with a lot of other endorsements.
Yeah, so you sort of got the Jacobs name and money against Gomez with what she brings to the table. The question is, Janessa Goldbeck, can she break through? It's going to be tough. But frankly, she's kind of gotten a bit of the buzz. I don't want to say more so than the other ones, but she's impressed a lot of kind of establishment Democrats that have support other candidates, but have actually contributed to her, which says something.
And I think she's acknowledged that she really has an uphill battle here.
Yeah.
And I think talking to a lot of the candidates, at least these, quote unquote, top four, a lot of them, they think that there's not a whole lot of name recognition out there. I mean, people might know Georgette from her time on council. People might know Jacobs from her previous run in Congress, maybe the family name. But they really don't feel like there's a whole lot of name recognition out there. That's why you're seeing people like Sarah Jacobs hammering TV ads right now. I mean, you turn on the channel, you really can't get away from them. She's putting out tons of mailers. It's also worth noting that what am I trying to say? Who was the Congresswoman? Susan Davis.
Susan Davis. We've forgotten her.
Yeah, I know. She hasn't endorsed anyone in this race. She did endorse Sarah Jacobs before for the 49th, but she hasn't endorsed anyone in this race. And she says that's because she wants to let voters make the decision. Now, you talk to political science professors, they say, well, you don't want to pick like either if it's say it's Georgette and Jacobs, you don't want to pick the wrong one and then come out on the other side saying, I didn't pick my successor.
Well, and we should note there's certainly several other progressive Democrats running. Tell us a little more about on the Republican side and the strongest candidate there.
So there's three Republicans running in the race. Famila Ramos, I guess you can say she's the most well-funded Republican in the race right now, and she's running on what she calls bread and butter issues. She's a retired nurse. And she really tries to play up her family values. I think it says mom as her job description, mom and nurse. She says, she wants to campaign on bringing jobs here, lowering taxes, increasing border security, kind of traditional Republican talking points there. Healthcare should depend on the free market. So kind of a stark difference to the Republicans. And she feels as a Republican that she's very underrepresented in the district, but she knows that she has a very, very tough uphill battle. I mean, she's going to be outspent by a very large margin by Democrats.
She's also been pretty outspoken, an outspoken opponent to abortion, which would be a tough sell in that heavily Democratic district.
She's been a big supporter of Duncan Hunter, organizing rallies for him. There's clips of her walking into Golden Hall with him, too, so she's tied to him as well.
All right, couple seconds left here. The other two Republicans.
Two other Republicans. One's a software engineer. They're really not out there campaigning too much. I mean, if you look on the FEC, they haven't even have any campaign donations.
So it's going to really narrow down to a handful of folks.
Oh, it's really going to narrow down. And I mean, is there a chance that a Republican wins in the primary? If you say that Gomez, Jacobs, and Goldbeck split the vote and one of those comes out of it, there's a chance. But then all Republicans would have to vote for one candidate. And
quickly, we might see two Democrats, though, get through to November.
Yeah, that's definitely a district, and given the firepower of the leading candidates, that could happen, and how little known and little resources the Republicans have. Right. But there's a lot of Democrats beyond those three we've mentioned, so we'll see if they split it up.
The Republican Party has not endorsed in this race. They said there was no viable candidate in October.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens as we go along. That wraps up another week of stories at the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, Priya Sridhar of KPBS News, Michael Smolens of the San Diego Union Tribune, Amitha Sharma and Matt Hoffman, also of KPBS. And for comprehensive coverage of all the races and issues in the March California primary, check out our election guide at kpbs.org. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for joining us today on the Roundtable.